Kia ora, welcome to Womenpower. This week we continue our election year political party interviews. We'll ask Greens Women's Affairs spokesperson Jan Logie about what policies the Greens will put forward in 2014 to advance women's equality. But first, we talk to Hamilton community activist Anjum Rahman about the barriers faced by women of colour in standing for electoral office. Kia ora Anjum, welcome to the programme.
Oh, kia ora, thank you for having me.
Women face lots of barriers in running for public office. Women of colour have even more to confront. Can you tell us about some of your experiences?
Well, in general, I think women always face issues around competency and being seen as not as competent. It's in terms of the skills and the traits that we value or that society seems to value, and also in terms of the role models we see. And I know like someone like Gina Davis, who's an American actress, has an institute where she does a lot of work around women in television and movies and how many women are in lead roles and so on. And the latest thing I saw from her was that in the crowd scenes only 17% are women. And I think women need role models, and society needs women role models, and when they don't have that, the default is the male role model, and women are measured against that instead of attributes that we might have more strongly being seen as relevant and important in the political sphere. So things like aggression are really valued, confrontation, those sharp cutting remarks and all of those sorts of things. And I think with a lot of women that's an issue. Now, I stood for Hamilton City Council last year in the East Ward. We had 26 candidates for 6 positions and 4 of them were women. And in the West Ward we had 24 candidates and I think 6 were women. So women are just not standing, and what it means is, I think, is that they are not feeling comfortable with the political system and the political environment and what it involves. I think time is also a real issue, the time commitments, and women are still doing a lot of the caregiving roles, you know, and they're having to work, they're having to have those responsibilities at home and then finding the time to compete. And what I'm finding, and it has concerned me a bit in some of the selections that I've seen, is that preference is given to people that can give time to a campaign. And time is a precious commodity, and to be able to give time you either have to be independently wealthy and not have to work for a living, or to have a partner that is earning enough to support you. And so that will then shut out so many people. I mean, even a young man who's a candidate and he's got 4 young kids, he's a sole breadwinner and he's standing in an unwinnable seat, but to do his best to get up the party vote. But that's a barrier for him as well, you know, for those of us that have to work for a living and can't put aside our jobs. How do you compete with someone that can?
And I think money is another huge issue for women, because women tend not to have much money in our society, and obviously you need time and money to run a political campaign. And I think perhaps the United States and Australia are quite well ahead of us with having Emily's List, which has been going for close to 30 years in the state, and that aims to provide funding to women at the start of their campaigns. So do we need to do something like that in New Zealand?
I think we do. I think that women, it's funny because I see a lot of the fundraising activities and the fundraising that's organised, and predominantly who's doing the work? It's women. It really is. Who's in the kitchen? Who's doing the serving? I mean, it's not that the guys aren't there, there are, but it's predominantly women who are doing that work, and yet that money isn't often going to women candidates because women are not getting selected as often and so on. So yes, I think there is a need for that. I mean, again, there's the societal barriers, so women earn less than men for the same jobs. Women don't get the higher paying jobs as often. So if you look at the number of accountants or lawyers who reach the tops of their professions, there's few women professors at university, there's few of them. Women as CEOs and boards of companies, even fewer of those. So that they're not in the highest paying jobs, so they don't have that income. And we know from the poverty stats that the most impoverished are women, and particularly single mothers, and yet, you know, they get the most blame of society for their own position. So when you don't have that big pull as well, and there's that sense in society that we've reached equality and that women have done everything, then there isn't that urgency and certainly not from the guys as well, to push for having more women. Although I have to say, you know, we had the fundraiser on Friday night, and there were some good men there supporting us, and that was really nice. And I think that we need to just keep pushing that fact and saying that no, we have not reached equality, not by a long shot, and there still are a lot of barriers for women.
Do you think women of colour are viewed more or less as unelectable, and that's why they don't get selected?
It's really hard in an electorate seat. There are some women of colour that get through. So you had someone like Suki Turner, who was Mayor of Dunedin. You had Georgina Bayer, who was won the Wairarapa seat as an electorate seat. But generally, it's really hard because the people that are making decisions of who should stand in an electorate will assess what that electorate is like and will make the assessment of, oh, they'd never vote her in, you know, as opposed to this particular, you know, other person who is not seen as threatening. And I often feel, I mean, and this is just my perception, there's no research or data behind it, but the sort of people of colour that get through are ones that are seen as not non-threatening, the ones that dress and look the same, the ones that, you know, don't have too much of an accent, don't challenge the status quo a lot. And so, you know, and particularly in some parties more than others, you just get these candidates that are there to sort of try and get the ethnic vote, but who haven't stood up for their communities and who haven't challenged any of the power structures and tried to get wins for their community. I particularly feel that in this last government, the one that we have now, that just hasn't happened. They've put up their candidates, but those candidates haven't delivered. You know?
And you know, we talk about people being selected on merit, but that's always talked about as though it's objective, but actually it's a completely subjective criterion, and it's normally white men who are defining it, and as you said earlier, they value the qualities that they have rather than qualities that women have or someone from a different race.
Right, I mean, like, just say for an example, right, rearing children, bringing them up is work, and it requires certain skills, right? But if you put on your CV that you're a mother, that is not going to give you any, you know, in the merit criteria, it doesn't give you anything. However, if you don't have children, like Helen Clark or Julia Gillard, you get totally attacked for it.
Yeah, that's fair as well.
So the not having children is seen as a demerit, but the having the children and having put the time into raising those children and invested in them and brought them up well is seen as of no value when it comes to competing against men. And that's the sort of way that these judgments are made, and the hypocrisy and the double standards around those judgments, that makes it really, really difficult. And also, like, for women, they do a lot of volunteer work. Like, a lot of the best experience that I have is from being on the board of SHAMA, which is the Hamilton Ethnic Women's Centre, and we provide a whole range of services for ethnic women in the city. I'm on the board of the Waikato Charitable Broadcasting Trust, which runs the community radio station in Hamilton. On the board of Ethnic New Zealand Trust, and in these positions I've done strategic planning, I've done employment issues, performance reviews, all sorts of work, but it's all on a volunteer basis, and when it goes on the CV it doesn't count. They're not measured in the same way as if I'd done those things in my paid employment.
And something else you've been involved in the wake of the West Auckland sex ring last year is the campaign for consent in Hamilton. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, well, there was the National Day of Action Against Rape Culture that was planned, and so there were marches to be held across the city, and I thought, well, Hamilton isn't doing something and we need to be doing something, so it had happened soon after the City Council campaign. I felt I still had those links that I've built up during the campaign, so I just sent out an email to a lot of those and said, right, are we doing a march in Hamilton? Who's in? And so we had a meeting. We had about 13 or 14 people turn up, and they were really good help with the march. I think we got over 200 people at that march, which for Hamilton is really good. It's
really good, it is.
And what was really, I don't know, it was sort of heartening for me was that people from the disability sector that came, and you know, these are people that were paraplegic even, and clearly this was such a strong issue for them that they came with their carers to be part of that march, and I found that really touching, but also it's an indictment on our society that these people are feeling vulnerable around sexual violence, that they felt that they needed to be there. And then with that we felt like we didn't want to just leave it there, that there was all this energy and passion and anger. And so we had a public meeting in December, and we had Louise Nicholas and Dr Neville Robertson and someone from the Rape and Sexual Abuse Healing Centre in a good kōrero there. And then we did this orientation project where we put in positive messages around campaign into orientation packs, and we're carrying on. So I was part of the, I did a submission to the Select Committee inquiry on the funding of specialist services for sexual violence, and I think that, you know, there's a whole issue around really poor funding for direct services around counselling and so on, but also that the approach towards funding is so focused on only treatment for the person in terms of counselling, and yet women that are going through severe trauma, they need support with housing, they need support with budgeting, they may need respite care, they might have to move out of a situation where they weren't self-sufficient and now actually need employment, and so support to get employment. So there's a whole range of wraparound services, and it's not funded, and there needs to be a lot more
to be done, isn't there? Thank you very much, Anjum.
Yeah, thank you.
Now it's time for the Womenpower fail and Womenpower win. A female student in Cairo suffered mass sexual assault by male students last month. The university president's reaction? He criticised her for the way she was dressed. That verbal assault on the victim was followed by criticism of her clothing by a well-known TV presenter who described her as being dressed like a belly dancer because she wore black pants, a long-sleeve pink shirt and a headscarf. The Womenpower win goes to the almost 1,000 groups and individuals who've made submissions to the parliamentary inquiry into the funding of specialist sexual assault services. The Social Services Select Committee is hearing oral submissions from around 100 submitters between 1 April and 7 May. Dr Kim McGregor of Rape Prevention Education told the committee that $10 million was needed to stabilise frontline services, as well as a 10-year plan to develop fully funded services in future. Survivor advocate Louise Nicholas last week delivered a powerful submission. Now we just need the government to act on the submitters' concerns. It's only 5 months until the general election. Now, let's hear from Jan Logie about what policies the Greens will advance this year to progress women's equality. Let's welcome Jan Logie. Kia ora, Jan, welcome to the program.
Kia ora, thanks for having me.
What do the Greens think are the most important issues for women in Aotearoa in 2014?
Well, that's a big question.
It is just a
yeah,
bit.
it is. Well, for the Greens, our mission is for every woman in New Zealand to feel safe and valued. And clearly at the moment that's not the reality for most women actually, that we're seeing right at the moment probably 1 in 5 women are in violent relationships in this country at the moment. The levels of sexual violence are really high in this country, and women are far too many women are really struggling on that day-to-day basis in terms of putting food on the table for themselves, let alone getting to that point in their life where they can sense that sense of kind of aspiration and hope for their future and kind of being able to do what, you know, their dreams, deliver on their dreams. So I think those things are kind of pretty fundamental, that we need to get some equality back on the table.
And so what 5 key policies will the Greens put forward at the election to try and achieve that?
Well, sadly, it's a little bit too early for me to be able to talk about exactly what our election priorities are going to be, because we're working that out as a party and we'll be announcing that soon. But what I can tell you are 5 key areas that we've been working on for a really long time that will give people an indication about what we stand for and the work that we're doing. So we've been working really hard around addressing sexual violence and domestic violence, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later in detail around the policies. Also around pay equity, that we had a bill in my name that's about making the pay transparent, so that women can actually take a case and check if they're not being paid equally in their workplace. We're all about making sure that women who are parents are supported in being parents, so that's about improving education, it's about paid parental leave, it's about actually saying parenting's a really important job and we value it, and having that show up in our policies. It's also about having policies that address the inequality between different groups of women as well. Yeah.
Okay. And why should women vote for the Greens in 2014?
I guess that it's really about having a vision for the country and about things that matter to us, and about valuing us as people as well as our environment, and having that whole vision for a better society that I think is really inspiring. It's not pretending things are better than they are and glossing over things. It's dealing with some of those tough realities so that we can all get to that future where, you know, we are able to live those good lives and have that fair future.
And I know that you're still working on your policy and you're not going to announce it now, but what parts of the women's election agenda Aotearoa 2014 could the Greens support? What we're looking for at Womenpower is a party to sign up to all the 100 points.
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing? And I think that's a conversation that's possible. I think, though, for the Greens that there's huge alignment between our policy and their women's agenda, which is great. But I think it would need to it's about us having a plan for the country and involving a whole lot of women in developing that plan together. So that, I would hope, would be one of our first steps, is maybe taking the women's election plan out to the rest of the country, getting that feedback, prioritising what are we going to do first, because in the plan there's a lot of really ambitious, fantastic initiatives, but we'd have to stagger them, you know, because we can't, I don't think, deliver a fair living wage and income support levels that are above the poverty line without changing our tax system first. So it's all about working out the plan to do it. Yeah.
And looking at the number of women MPs in the House, we're basically stuck at a third in New Zealand, and that's actually been the same for the last 5 elections now. There was a terrible outcry last year when Labour suggested concrete steps, even though more than 100 other countries have done that. What are the Greens going to do to advance that?
Well, you know, and I just have to plug the Greens here, because thank God for us, otherwise we would have dropped down from that 30%, because we have an absolute commitment to equal representation. We have a policy of 60-40 threshold, so that can be 60% men or 60% women, which we're almost at the moment. 57% of our caucus are women at the moment. And we want to see that spread across Parliament. And we've been working quite hard this term to change the way that Parliament works to better support young mothers, that Holly Walker.
That's really important.
It is, so that we get more women and different types of women into politics, so that all of our voices are truly represented, rather than just the women who have a loud enough voice. Yeah.
Do you think that more can be done to make the House's sitting hours more family friendly? I mean, I know they've cut back on the Thursday night, so they don't have those 3 late nights, but could more in that regard be looked at?
I think a lot more could be done to look at the practices of Parliament to make it more family friendly, and also just to encourage more diversity and more connection to our communities as well. And every term there's a review of speakers' rulings and the chance to look at how we can do that, and that would be something that we'd be looking at.
What are concrete practical steps that can be taken to reduce and then eliminate sexual violence against women?
Well, thank you for asking. This is a particular passion of mine that I've initiated. What we've got is a cross-party inquiry into funding for sexual violence support services at the moment, which is our first chance ever to get cross-party agreement in Parliament about the needs and making this a priority. And what we've been hearing through the inquiry is that we need a whole system approach. So we need a look at prevention, we need to look at crisis support and the justice system support, and then counselling and support for people with kind of more complex needs of post-traumatic stress, as well as treatment for offenders. At the moment, we have completely inadequate responses at every piece of that puzzle. So we actually need to invest a significant amount of money straight away to make sure that the groups that we've got at the moment don't fall over, and then we need to have a really comprehensive plan to actually just start fixing this, because it is fixable. Yeah.
Well, no other country in the world has fixed it or come close, and so much of what we seem to do on this issue is actually ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, because actually what we want is men to stop raping and torturing women.
Yes.
And as far as I can see, we've got no progress on that at all.
No, we haven't, and which is part of that thing. The stuff that people have been coming up with from prevention is things like we need public education campaigns, like culture change. We need to be working with journalists around the kind of way we frame these stories in our media. We need to be into kindergartens and schools and high schools and be working with bars around their policies. So it's a whole of society response, but critical to that is, for me, in the first step and why we did the inquiry, is we can't do any of that unless we've got the support services, because what happens when you start doing that work is that people start feeling that they can disclose, and it's really dangerous to start doing that if there's no support there for those people to be able to get the support they need to.
And what are key steps we need to take to address our domestic violence problem?
Well, this is, again, it's one of those things that we actually have to recognise that this is one of, academics describe it as a wicked problem, which means that there's no one solution. There's no one thing we can do to fix it. So we have to look at all of our society. We have to look at what our police practice is, how our family courts are working and our criminal courts, and how our work and income policies are working, and our housing policies, and our funding towards support organisations, and our workplace policies. So we've got to get a plan and bring everyone back to basics and say, okay, this is what domestic violence is, and analyse our responses in each of those areas. I've just proposed a bill to start looking at some solutions in workplaces, because we know that a significant number of women never disclose to anyone that they're in a violent relationship, and the only person who knows really is their workmates, because they see the impacts in the workplace. And we've just had research done that's showing that that's actually going to save our businesses money as well. So there's a real potential for win-win-win in all of this. It's going to save government budget lines in the long run, because the costs of violence for our society are huge. And it's also going to help make our society more productive and vibrant, as well as just basic kind of saving lives.
A lot to do. Thanks very much, Jen.
Cheers.
Now it's time for News of the Week. 5 years ago, Berivan Elif Khalees was trapped in a nightmare, suffering daily beatings by a husband she'd been forced to marry when she was 15. Now she's just been elected mayor of her hometown in southeastern Turkey and is determined to fight for women's rights. Khalees was taken out of school by her parents after 4 years of primary education and forced to marry a cousin. The number of child brides in Turkey is estimated at 181,000, even though the practice is illegal. Khalees summoned up the courage to get a divorce when she was 28. As well as her political career, she now aims to get a high school diploma and then study psychology or sociology. New Zealand's low proportion of female board members on large listed companies is solidifying the glass ceiling for women, a University of Canterbury gender expert says. Associate Professor Anik Masalo said that this country's failure to implement positive measures such as quotas, to improve the mere 14.5% of women on boards, was stalling progress. She said that other countries provided models, ranging from legislation containing sanctions in Norway to self-regulation as in Australia. She said most of the New Zealand knee-jerk criticism of quotas was based on the fear of a man ban, but the global financial crisis had arguably been caused by the actions of some very white male boards of directors. A new study of Indian women has found that those who are more educated or earn higher salaries than their husbands face a greater risk of abuse. A new book, We Are the Work, The Making of Men Stopping Violence, has been published in the United States to chronicle the history of the Men Stopping Violence organisation, which has been working for 3 decades to end violence against women by engaging with perpetrators. Women activists won greater rights for women under Egypt's new constitution. However, they're still waiting for those rights to become a practical reality. Men hold an overwhelming lock on decision-making in politics, and violence against women in public has grown in the past 3 years. A memorandum of understanding was signed in Kathmandu on April 15 with the aim of promoting gender equality, gender justice and the empowerment of women in Southeast Asian countries. Now it's time for this week's 5 action points. Provide active support to women of colour to assist them to run for office. Recognise both conscious and unconscious bias against candidates of different genders and ethnicities and take specific steps to deal with it. Fundraise to back female candidates, as is done in the United States and Australia with Emily's List. Support action to end sexual violence against women, even if you only have time to email your MP and the Prime Minister about it. Make an appointment with your MP to talk to him or her about the Women's Election Agenda Aotearoa. That's our program for this week. Join me next week when we'll talk to Rupa Sushdev about the experiences of South Asian women living in New Zealand. We'll also hear from social activist Jessie Hume about how social media can be used by women to campaign more effectively for change. Thanks for watching. Ka kite anō.